Good evening, and welcome to tonight's installment of our Unmasked Series. My name is Afeni Grace. I am the program coordinator for the Harvey B. Gantt Center. For this evening's conversation, we hear from teachers in our local school system and leaders dedicated to working towards equity in education as we discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted students and families caught in the digital divide, what we can do now and in the future to narrow this gap. The 2-minute audience survey is currently linked in our YouTube chat as a way to gauge your perspective as our audience. If you have not completed it yet, please take the time to do so now. Please also feel free to use that YouTube chat for any questions or comments you have throughout the evening. We will address the survey results and audience questions in the second half of the program. To lead tonight's discussion, we are proud to bring on Sonja Gantt, the Executive Director of the CMS Foundation. Prior to leading the CMS Foundation, Ms. Gantt has a 30-year media career as a journalist. Her extensive community service over the years supports her role as leader of the foundation, which works closely with local corporations, foundations, and community groups. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sonja.
Afeni, I'm so excited to be with you. I think this topic is extremely important. And while so many of us are working from home, we understand clearly how important our technology is right now. And I want to say to all of us, I want you to think for just a moment, if you have the privilege of watching tonight, that means you have a computer and you have connectivity in your home. And for so many of us, it has become a necessity, something we take for granted. It's how we shop. It's often how we work. It's how we access information, whether it's medical information or just something we're curious about. But there are so many in our community who do not have these tools. And that's the divide we're talking about tonight. I'm excited to have a really wonderful panel to join me in the discussion. And first, I want to introduce to you from the Center of Racial Equity in Education in North Carolina. Please welcome Janeen Bryant. She is the Director of Operations there, and she describes herself not only as she a facilitator and intersectional educator and trainer, she's also, she says, a self-described agitator. So we are delighted to have Janeen joining us.
So nice to be here with all of you.
We are grateful to have you, Janeen. Thank you. Next, we have Pat Millen. Pat is the Executive Director of E2D, which stands for Eliminate the Digital Divide. It's a local nonprofit that's really focused on addressing the digital divide. His organization has distributed 12,000 computers to families over the years, and he's also put a number of CMS high school students to work building the next tech workforce. We're going to learn much more about his organization throughout this evening. And finally, during Teacher Appreciation Week, I could not be happier, especially on the official Teacher Appreciation Day, to welcome our final two panelists. They are both educators at West Charlotte High School. First, join me in welcoming artist and small business owner and visual arts teacher by day, Natalie Jones, and also English teacher Franchone, who also describes herself as a creative spirit in all aspects of the arts, whether it's writing, singing, or dancing. So let me say both to Natalie and to Franchone, thank you so much. I think I can easily say that on behalf of all of the parents out there who are now getting just a little bit of a taste of what you all do for our students each day. We want to say thank you so much, and I hope that your students wished you well today as well. So let's begin with you, because you're the ones who really, many of us are working from home, but your work changed when you had to move out of the classroom and into your homes. And so I want to start first with you, Franchone. Just kind of give us an idea of what this virtual experience has been like for you.
Well, it came so suddenly. It was on a Friday. We were told we're not coming back, and we had to just kind of flip all of our plans. You know, we had originally planned to be in the classroom. So all your lesson plans that you have, They're based on your interaction with students. They're not based on them sitting at a computer and doing work and you're on a Zoom meeting with them. Everything, it wasn't based on that. So we just had to just switch on the dime, like just as quickly as we could to just try to accommodate students. And it has been a challenge because, I have 5 children as well, and they're all in CMS school. Well, one is in college, but they're in CMS school. So it's a lot, to have to not only, help them with what they have, and then also I'm teaching online. So we've had to move very quickly and act very swiftly.
I'm so
Develop
glad-
some new skills.
Yes, I'm
as
so
well.
glad you raised that point, because I think people forget teachers have families too. And all of their family members are now home while they are also trying to conduct their classes.
Exactly.
So Natalie, I think the challenge has to be even tougher for you, because as a visual arts educator, your students don't have those supplies at home. Give us an idea of what the experience has been like.
Yeah, that's definitely been an adjustment. The good news is kids use a lot of technology as far as cell phones. So since I also teach photography, I've also been able to incorporate my photography projects with my visual arts students. And that has been working out really well. It's just been kind of a learning curve with the students being able to upload the images. They've had kind of a hard time figuring out what file to use, or just different things like that, just how to upload the work itself. But also you got to remember that they come to visual arts class, it's typically their favorite class. It's a way for them to just relax and exhale and just, kind of zone out for that one class period a day. And they're actually not getting that now.
Yeah. Do you find that most of them are logging on?
For me, they're logging in. I can see that they're logging in, but sometimes they're just not really engaged in doing the work. And I feel like maybe they just really need that direct instruction that they normally would get, or they're just really not used to this. This is not something that they've been trained for. We haven't been practicing for this moment. You practice for the tornado drill, you practice for the fire drill, but nobody's practiced for this. So it's very new for them. And so they're kind of logging on for me. Are they doing the work right now? Not the ones who can, I think, are trying. It's just, you just don't know.
That might be surprising for a lot of the people watching, because I think we always think that those who are younger than us have adapted a lot easier to the technology. But I've been reading some of the student comments on social media, and it almost sounds like this generation that we described as the tech experts, they really miss that human interaction with their teachers. And not that you're not interacting over Zoom, but that is a little bit of a barrier. It's a little bit different than walking past them in the halls or seeing them in your classrooms.
Right. And I think the other thing with technology is they're used to being on cell phones. They might play video games, but as far as, using Photoshop or some sort of processing system on a computer, they really don't get that these days.
What advice would you all have for parents who are struggling at home? I know the school district has set up a call center where parents can call with their technology questions, academic questions, but for parents who are in a new role at home, not just supporting with homework, but many themselves might not have had to work with the computer or aren't used to the Chromebooks that the students have. What's your advice for them?
For me, because I'm as a parent, I would say just relax. Try, but don't stress out about it. Because we all have to kind of work to get to a place where we're all comfortable with how this is going to roll out. Because in the future, I think we're just going to have to start younger with media literacy and getting, access for students. I don't think we can roll back. We're not going to go back to a typewriter. So we're moving forward. And I think that if parents could just relax and just roll with the flow. But, you know, like if you can't get on the Zoom with your kids that day, don't worry about it. Everything is going to be just fine. That's my advice. Just relax and just take your time. It will be fine. Because I get a lot of parents who are like really stressed out that they can't, you know, access something, or, you know, something didn't work with the, you know, getting to a something that the student had assigned an assignment, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Natalie, would you like to add anything to that?
I definitely agree with Franchone, but I think it's also important to understand that we went to school for this. Like, this is what we do every day. So I think lowering the expectations that parents have on themselves to get everything done, to get all the assignments in, will really be helpful for them. It's just a really stressful time now for everyone.
And I do think certainly the school district recognizes that. I want to say again to all the parents who are watching out there, if you go to the CMS website, and forgive me, I should have had that phone number ready. There's a call center that's set up that's open during the day if you're having any computer challenges and or just want to talk to the academic folks. They are ready and willing to help you. Before I transition, I just want to know from Franchone and Natalie, what concerns you most at this time? You know, we are hearing that across the country, many students aren't logging on or not engaging. I know here in CMS, the superintendent talked on Friday about the fact that there are 3,000 students that we haven't had any contact with. And there were teams of folks going out this week to try to make home visits. That's after many calls weren't successful. Just what concerns you most as you think about wrapping up this year and then moving into next year?
For me, I just wonder how, you know, what are we thinking about for the future? I think right now we have to deal with what we have at hand, but we have to start thinking about what the next school year is going to look like for us. And think about how corporations could possibly come in and assist, because, you know, if people don't have access to technology, they don't have access to hotspots and internet, then we're asking for something, we're putting like some pressure on people to have these things when maybe they might not be able to, you know, acquire these things. So I think that is something that concerns me. We can't go in to the next year, the next school year, thinking like, okay, well, everybody has a computer, everybody has a hotspot, we're good to go. I think there's a bigger picture that we need to be looking at moving forward.
And Franchone, before you start, I'm so glad that, or I should say before Natalie starts, I do want to share that we really were fortunate in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. For those who are watching and may not know, 4th through 12th graders all had a laptop that they were able to take home. But CMS leaders knew very early that many homes were without internet access. And so they brought to the foundation the idea that we need to raise some funds and be able to purchase some mobile hotspots for our students. And so I know that you all know we began giving those out. And so at least in the city of Charlotte, if you are in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, you have internet access. And I know for a lot of families that were surveyed in the beginning, things have been changing. They might have had internet access, and because now they've had to move out of homes, they no longer have it. So I just want to say, if you're a CMS student, you should be reaching out to your school because we do have a solution to the connectivity problem. And I guess I should go ahead and say a big thank you to the 3 organizations that made that happen. Carolina Panthers owner, the John M. Belk Endowment, and also the David Belk Cannon Foundation. I had to say that thank you because they really solved a big problem for our students. But you're right, those devices have 6 months of service. And next year, if we go in and out of in-classroom learning or being at home, depending on what the virus does in the fall, it will be extremely important to have that access. So Natalie, let me just give you a chance to share very quickly about what most concerns you as you look forward.
I'm actually concerned about the impact that it's having on students, the mental health conditions, things that they're dealing with having to be home for a long time, not being able to get out and go to school and socialize. So I'm kind of worried about the long-term effects that this will have. And I'm also worried about since we are doing the virtual instruction now, how difficult or challenging is it going to be when we get back into the classroom to get the students reacclimated to the systems and the procedures and, just the daily routines of being in school again?
Those are all extremely valid concerns. I want to thank you both for sharing. We'll continue talking with you throughout this evening. I want to bring in right now, though, from the Center for Racial Equity and Education in North Carolina, Janeen Bryant. She is the Director of Operations, and she has more of a statewide view. And give us an idea, Janeen, just of how this issue is rolling out across the state. I know you all have a number of fellows who work in many different districts.
Yes, we do. I want to say first thank you to the Gantt for giving us this opportunity to have a real conversation about what is inherently an unequitable issue. So we actually know that in 2015, the state already had identified that there was a digital divide. And one of the reasons that this was a known factor is actually because there was an increasing homework gap. And so they knew that when teachers were assigning homework, and if the homework had a component for internet access, they knew that those expectations were not going to be equal across the state because they knew that some students actually did not have access to broad-based internet and high-speed internet at home. And so we've actually known for a while about the digital divide, but as we've moved forward in through the impact of COVID-19, what we see is that this is really, really harming students who are most marginalized. And we're seeing that particularly in rural areas, that they are having a lot of struggle to get access to what we here in a more well-resourced area may take for granted. So one example from our fellows were teachers and administrators, principals, riding on school buses to getting off the bus at different stops and literally taking a clipboard and handwriting with a pencil and paper what people needed. And then they're going back to school, taking those pencil paper, disinfecting them, and then calculating the number of packets they need to distribute per bus route. Wow. So whereas we're talking about the digital divide with actual access to technology, some people are still using paper and pencil to think about access to regular baseline instruction.
Thank you for that reminder, because I think you're exactly correct. If your view is only Charlotte, you don't fully understand what's happening in the rest of our state, much of it, which is rural. I also think you raised just a good point that even in those rural communities, I think there's an assumption that usually students can go somewhere else if they need internet access and they don't have it at home. And what COVID-19 has said to us is that when a student can't get to the library or a community center, then we really understand how critical this access issue is.
Right. And access is not the same as subscription. So what we have noticed is that a lot of people think, oh, I have access to broad-based internet. That does not mean that you can afford it. That also doesn't mean that you have digital literacy and know how to access the technology. So many people are dependent on Zoom and other kinds of video conferencing technology. That doesn't mean that you know how to quickly get online and utilize that technology. So when we see these kinds of barriers, we know we're going to exacerbate what was already existing as a digital divide. And over the course of this time, what normally we talk about is summer learning loss or the summer slide. Now people are referring to the COVID slide, and just how critical it's going to be for us to address long-term learning losses. We haven't yet come up with fully sustainable solutions to fill in this gap for learning.
Janeen, what would the center like to see happen in this state in regards to this issue?
So there's actually a lot of supports that are built into the 2015 broad-based internet policy, because broadband internet, I think, it's kind of ubiquitous, right? Just as you started off with, it's everywhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people understand it. So we really support the idea that access to those devices and technology, that's fundamental. We've got to get devices into students' hands so they know, and then they know how to use it. We've got to get our teachers ready to utilize these supports. And now we also have to get our parents trained and digitally literate, because we now see more than ever the infrastructure around our technology support is not just about handing a child a laptop. We've actually got to have a parent teacher school partnership that allows us to communicate as a community with each other and to really support our children. We also want to see, and this may seem like a radical idea, but we also need to really think about universal access to Wi-Fi. The statewide access to Wi-Fi right now is not a comprehensive network, and so we have never had a conversation that talks about what would it look like for our entire community to have access to Wi-Fi.
Great point. All right, Janeen, stand by. I want to bring in now Pat Millen from E2D. We're going to ask him to join the conversation. And as Pat comes in, I do want to share that the CMS Foundation's ability to secure the funds first to buy those mobile hotspots, but Pat's role in this was that Pat worked with the Chief Technology Officer at CMS to find the deal. And so we are extremely grateful for his work. And Pat, as we start, I just want you to share a little bit about E2D and what you do in our schools and also what you do for families in this area.
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Our family started E2D, which stands for Eliminated the Digital Divide, back in 2013 when my daughter, who was 12 at the time, came home from school and said, every assignment we get in school presumes there's a computer in the home. And I know that there are a lot of kids at our school that don't have them, and therefore they can't do the work. And she said, what are we going to do about this? And as a family, we just got sort of stuck on that question, and we started researching it and looking into it. And what we found was that this digital divide, this homework gap, while very challenging in terms, you need to have the three things. You need to have a computer, you need to have broadband access, and as Janeen said, you need to know what to do with it. You need to be able to use those devices. We just started tackling it, just trying to find out, because what we found was that most of these three items existed in sort of hiding in plain sight. So had anybody ever asked companies in Charlotte, hey, what do you do with your computers when your employees are done with them? That sounds like a pretty simple question. We found that when we told people that we wanted to get their computers so that we could refurbish them and get them out to families that otherwise would find it difficult to afford them, companies very much embraced that idea. So over the course of the 7 years now that we've been doing this, we now have hired students on 4 high school campuses that run computer refurbishment labs to prepare these computers. We get the donations in, we've hired these kids, we've trained these kids, we pay these kids. I mean, it's a job, and it's a very satisfying job because these kids are doing the very work that will then go back into communities and make such an amazing difference.
That's good pay. I understand up to $15 an hour.
Absolutely. It's a technology job. These are jobs that any kid would want to get upon finishing high school or after they go to college.
So Pat, I also want you to share, you're part of a group in Charlotte called the Charlotte Digital Inclusion Alliance. And you all released a playbook, I think about 18 months ago, where you really wanted to wrap your arms around how do we make our community more, make sure that digital literacy is available, as well as access to additional tools and computers. And you set a goal. I want to get to this goal because I think it can sound good, but then when you dig a little deeper into the numbers, you just kind of appreciate how many people in our community don't have access. The goal is to reduce, you have 19% of the county that's missing internet, and you want to reduce that to 9% in 10 years. Give us an idea of some of the activities that are happening. Where are we? I know you only have been a year and a half at this, so I don't know if we've moved from the 19% or not.
Mm-hmm. So the group is called the Charlotte Digital Inclusion Alliance, and it was founded a few years ago to try to pull together stakeholders that participate in trying to find resolutions for this digital divide. And so through our research, we did find that overall there was 19% of the county that didn't have access to the internet in their homes. However, That's a very, very misleading figure if you consider that there are lots of neighborhoods in Charlotte where that number is 50, 60, 70%. And so, and also the goal to get down to 9%, that's not my goal. My goal is to get it down to 0%. I'm 100% with Janeen. I believe that we need to have universal access for the internet in every home. And if you think about it, Sonja, 100 years ago in 1920, only 35% of American households had electricity. And 9 years after that, except for the most rural locations, 85% of Americans had electricity. And so today you wouldn't go, wow, wouldn't it be great if people had access to electricity? There are still people in Charlotte that are like, wouldn't it be great if all these families were to have access to the internet? That's no longer a standard that we should be applying. We should be saying everyone must have access to the internet in order to be successful in 2020 in Charlotte, North Carolina. And to aspire to anything less than that, I think is underreaching.
You have, I mentioned that 12,000 computers have been given out in the years that you all have been doing this work. Also, talk to us a little bit about the digital literacy efforts. I know that there's a partnership at the Mecklenburg County Jail. I mean, you're extremely passionate, Pat. I remember our first meeting. You've been talking about this a long time. And I remember in that first meeting, you said we need to send those Chromebooks home with students and we need to make sure they have hotspots to go with them. So I was so glad that you could be part of, you were the one who found the deal and that we could be partnering in this way.
Well, it's been such a great partnership. I actually wrote myself a note and taped it to my computer. CMS has done an amazing job with how they've been combating this. The teachers have been phenomenal. The technology staff has been phenomenal. And what I like the most about it, Sonja, is there was no hesitation. When this thing hit, they're like, we're sending these Chromebooks home right away. They didn't do a risk analysis to determine, all right, are we going to get them back or not? They're like, no, our students need them and they need them now. That is a level of confidence and sound leadership that I think that the school board led by Elise Dashew and Superintendent Winston, that is really to be applauded. The fact that there are still 3,000 kids that are missing is to be lamented for sure, but I can tell you CMS is working hard to try to make sure that every kid, every family has access during this time. And all that this has occurred in the last literally month, if you think about it, is that yes, like everybody has said, we knew there was a digital divide, but now in great relief, we now know just how severe being on the wrong side of the digital divide can be. And so my family woke up this morning to an outage on our internet, and you would have thought like our house was on fire. People are like, oh my gosh, we can't get on the computer. And I'm like, what a grounding way to go into this conversation tonight, because it makes you realize just how essential it is. Our partners on the digital literacy side are really important, Sonja. We do a lot of work with Digital Charlotte, which is out of Queen's University of Charlotte. We work with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg library system. We work with Goodwill. There are the YMCA, the YWCA. There are a lot of people out there that are working hard to make sure that kids and their parents know how to use computers as best they can.
And we want, for those of you who are listening tonight and want to brush up on your computer skills, I feel like I received an email from the library this week about some classes that they were rolling out now. And so is there a good place, Pat, and maybe it is the library, where folks can figure out what classes are being offered and how to take advantage of them? Is there a central space for that?
There is. If you haven't been to the library website, it is an absolute font of information. There is almost no subject that you can't dive deep online if you can get online and get to the library website. You can learn, if you're an ESL student in the second grade, there's reading, there's language, all the way up to seniors in high school that are working on we're working on their exit projects. There is so much really good information at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library website.
Okay, and I just caught the kind of irony in the way that I said that. So that assumes that you have a computer and you have access and you want to learn more. If you know someone who doesn't have that, then give people, and just very quickly, because I know we want to transition to our survey results, but in terms of accessing the computers that you provide to families, how do people do that? Because you refurbish these computers and then provide them at a greatly reduced price.
Right. So the families, everybody's got skin in this game. The families pay $75 to get access to these computers, and then the community also subsidizes the balance of that cost. The problem is, Sonja, is we have hundreds and hundreds of computers, but the need in this community is tens of thousands. So I can't just like open up a website and say, call us, come and get your computer. We're doing everything we can right now to build as many computers as we can to fulfill the need as best we can. But again, if you're watching this and you are a manager of a corporation that can donate computers, we need every computer we can get our hands on.
We do. All right, Pat, thank you very much. We're going to transition over now. I hope all of you took part in the survey. Afeni, I think you have some results to share with us now.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Sonja. So we're going to switch gears for a moment and discuss the results of the audience survey. Please keep in mind that these results are only based on our audience members who completed the survey. So our first question was, are you one of the following? We have here 28% of our surveyors are teachers, 24% are parents, 12% are employed in the K-12 system, and we actually have a small percentage of viewers who are Charlotte-Mecklenburg school parents, parents of students in that system. Our next question was, what would you say is the greatest contributing factor to those who suffer in the digital divide? We have 44%, a slight majority, who stated that it's the lack of access to resources such as a library or home computer. We have 36% who selected that it's household income level. We have 8% who selected education level. We even have a small percentage who selected that it's all of the above. So education level, income, race and ethnicity, and lack of access to resources. Our next question was, the digital divide includes both technological access and literacy. Have you or someone you know been affected by the digital divide? So we have an overwhelming majority of 80% who selected that they themselves have been affected or that they know someone. And we did ask for them to give a little bit more information if they were affected. And surveyors gave information such as lack of Wi-Fi or lack of consistent Wi-Fi access or no digital devices at all. Or some people only use their cell phones as their digital device. And even those who, if they only use their cell phone, they can't afford to pay the bills, or their lack of, and other people also said that it's the lack of parental and community support. So our next question is, what do you think can make the strongest initial impact in reducing the digital divide? So we have here about 32% selected that it's local government, 20% selected that it's the superintendent of education who can have the greatest impact, 20% said it's local school districts. We have some individual responses such as community support agencies, parental involvement, and that it's going to take all of the above to have the strongest initial impact. So based on these results, Sonja, is there something that stood out to you or the panelists?
There were quite a few things. Thank you, Afeni, for that. I want to go back to Natalie and Franchone, and I wanted to see if you all have a reaction to how the group felt that the schools should play a role. Both of you teach in high school, and I'm curious what you see with your students. By the time they reach you, would you say that they're fairly computer literate?
I would say no. I feel like when I was growing up, I was on a track toward computer literacy, starting with the typewriter and then moving to the computers, and just the way I was moving. I think right now, they're not, something is missing in the lower grades. I mean, I think they just assume they give, because my children, they just get the device and it's kind of like, you just kind of got to figure it out. I believe that's the way it's been, handed to them. But they definitely, for me, and I teach mostly seniors, they still struggle with like just basic, opening a document and uploading things. Like Natalie said, just a simple things that you would think are simple, like just taking a document and uploading it to the computer. I've had a lot of conversations of late with parents who I've walked them through the process of putting helping their child put work on the computer so that I can access it. So I think it needs to just start earlier.
Natalie, what's been your experience?
I've definitely had the same experience as Franchone. I have a 12th grade visual arts class, and one of their requirements is that they have to upload their work into a Google folder on Google Drive. And every time it comes to upload work, I have to walk them through the process of how to find their Google folders. So I totally agree. They just need to start younger. I actually taught 1 year in Philly, and it was elementary, and those kids had a computer course, so that alternated with art. So I think it just depends on the school district, maybe even the state. But I definitely think, with it being 2020, the kids definitely need to have more of a background and more experience working with computer programs.
I think it's going to be tough to get a job if you are not computer literate in this society. Janeen, I'm curious about your thoughts on the high percentage of folks who felt like, I think the local government needed to play a role, or I shouldn't say, I'm going to say local government, but I think it also included state, just government in general, where it was local government. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, right now we seem to be desperate for leadership. And I think people are really hoping that the government will help set a direction for how we're supposed to respond and react to this moment. And I was really surprised by that too, but it made me think about this question that an author I know named Adrienne Marie Brown, she asked, when she centers justice and equity and access, she always asks, who are we and how do we share? And I think that right now we're not feeling very generous amongst each other. So we're actually hoping that someone will step in and create the space for which, kind of the infrastructure for which we're able to share equitably. And so I think that's a real important. I think it's really important. I think it's a reflection of how we're actually having to learn some new skills around how interdependent we actually are, because we were kind of taught this narrative about being independent and being out for ourselves and competing with each other. And now we're just seeing how literally networked we are, and how codependent we are on each other. And I think people are looking for guidance.
Pat, I want you to weigh in on that question because I know there's a city and county representation on the Charlotte Digital Inclusion Alliance, just to talk about some of the efforts that local government is making.
So it's a huge issue that government needs to be solving a large share of it, but a lot of it's being governed by telecommunications companies, access, pricing. There are plans where the privileged can buy incredibly fast internet, and then there are plans where lower income families really suffer to be able to buy even an entry level. That for now is probably not going to be resolved by government. It's just unfortunately not the right government to be dictating those sorts of terms. But I will say that the county commission as well as the city council has great representation that I think is very interested in trying to make a difference. And again, as unfortunate as it sounds, I think that the crisis that we're in right now is hopefully going to be dictating the terms as to how we're approaching this thing going forward. Again, we can lament what hasn't happened, or we can embrace the opportunity to start getting this thing right. But we can't just wait for government to solve it. We have to be active in terms of advocacy in the telecommunications industry, within our schools. And it's a multi-layered solution that's going to require, as Janeen said, a tremendous amount of leadership from a lot of different groups.
Talk about some of the creative ways that this could happen. I'm sure many of those who are watching with us tonight have heard about buses wired with high-speed access and whether or not they could be parked in different places. Share with us what this could look like.
So there are a lot of creative ways, and of course, crisis sometimes is what spurs innovation. So yeah, there are hotspots, very large hotspots that you could potentially put on a school bus. It's happening right now in Coachella Valley, California, where at the end of the last shift on Fridays, they park the bus over in certain affordable housing districts for the weekend, and up to 40 different computers can attach to those hotspots throughout the weekend, all at the same time. It's not a perfect technology. There's a lot that needs to happen to make that happen. But again, it comes down to, does our community have the will to see where the gaps are in the access and to go find ways to solve those gaps? You know, there are plenty of families that cannot afford smartphones, but if you are fortunate to own a smartphone, and many of our families do, every one of those smartphones, if it was purchased within the last 5 years, has the ability to become a tethering hotspot. The technology exists within the phone. That doesn't mean that the carrier wants you to know about it or to offer it at a reasonable price. But now, again, has there ever been a better time to start exploring, all right, if that technology exists and there's a gap in terms of access, is now not the time that we need to find the will to go to the companies to say, open up these access points, give it to us with speed, and give it to us without data caps. Now is the time.
Now would be the time. Okay, we want to take some audience questions here. And the first one I want to get to, this is for Natalie or Franchone. And the question is, are students still required to take, this person may be dating themselves, they call them keyboarding classes. So I guess what would be, I remember that's what they were called when I was in school, but the updated version of that, I don't know, Natalie or Franchone, do you know what the requirement is now?
I know they have a class called Microsoft Office, but I'm not sure if they actually learn, you know, where all the letters are on the keyboard. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that course is through CTE. It's a whole, I think it's the suite. It's like Microsoft Suite, and then they actually they're certified after in the different programs like Microsoft Office or PowerPoint. But you would have to be on that track. Like you would have to take that. It's not something that everyone takes in class in school.
Pat, a question for you about the 19% that you mentioned. And the question is, where can we find the data outlining that 19%? So this sounds like possibly where to find that digital inclusion playbook that you all released.
Right. If you go on to any search engine and search for Charlotte Digital Inclusion Alliance, the playbook is one of the tabs that you can open up. That data came to us in partnership with Digital Charlotte at Queen's University, as well as the North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office, which is part of the Department of Commerce for the state of North Carolina. They did block census data research, block by block by block, to determine what those rates are. Am I 1,000% confident that that's accurate? No, but it is definitely rooted in data that exists in Raleigh that we've researched from.
You just provided another great reminder of why we need to fill out our census forms. Yeah, so
Okay.
just put that in there. There's a lot of information they collect and use that way. Here's a question about, is CMS employing any hotspots in under-resourced schools? And I'm delighted, I'll answer that one, yes. Every single school has access to the hotspots that the CMS Foundation was able to purchase for the school district. So if you know a student who is now having connectivity issues, and again, there are some, I heard a story the other day about a mother who was running the Chromebook off her phone and then received her bill and realized why that was not a good idea because of all the data that was used. So we're having more people reach out, but there are hotspots. You need to reach out to your child's school directly and they will make sure you get one. This question, I think, could be, I'm going to throw it to you, Janeen, and the question is, would it be a good idea for Charlotte to look at internet access as a utility like electricity or gas? And I think I have an idea of what you would say about that, but I'm gonna let you say it.
Well, I could say it out loud again for the people in the back. Yes, and I think in terms of a state, it needs to be statewide access. And I'm actually a huge proponent of free Wi-Fi access, for particularly for K-12 or K-20 students, because we're now considering the internet as a tool. So just as you would enter into public school and have access to all of the facets of a public school education where you're in a physical school space, when we are reliant upon video conferencing and Google Classroom and Canvas and Zoom, we've got to make the tools available for our students to have equal access, or else ultimately, just as Pat alluded to, what's going to happen is we are actually going to put ourselves in an economic deficit. So by not creating access, we're actually digging ourselves a hole. It's going to be really hard to get out of on the other side of this.
I want you all to think of your final remarks as we begin to close out, and I'm going to answer two of these questions. One of them is, do we have data on how many of the 3,000 missing students are homeless? And I don't have that data to share with you, but I will tell you, as many of you know, there are approximately between 4,000 and 5,000 homeless students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And when we talk about that, housing is unstable. The first people to get hotspots were the social workers who work with our homeless students. They were priority one. And so some of those students may be homeless. You should know the school district was calling initially for a long time, and now they are doing home visits at the last known home address. So I'm not certain that we know how many are homeless, but the homeless students in our district are paired with a social worker and they stay connected to them. And so those folks we kind of have a good beat on, but some of them could be. Okay, so we want to give you all a chance for final remarks. And Pat, I'll begin with you.
So what we're experiencing right now for so many of our students is an absolute tragedy. It's a travesty. It's unacceptable. And as a community, we simply cannot allow this to continue to transpire. All that said, I have never been more optimistic about where we can go from here. We can only go up. And so my final comment is very simply this. In the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, or city of Charlotte and in the state of North Carolina, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of computers that are retired every single year. Many of them are sold off to junk merchants. Some of them are put through wood chippers. We need to change the culture so that companies are saying, when our computers are over, when their lives are no longer ours, we're going to donate them to students that need them desperately. Sonja, I'm optimistic that this is going to happen. We've made some good progress over the last several years. This is going to really accelerate. We now know what we have to do, and it's time to get busy doing it.
Wonderful. All right, Janeen.
Thank you. I wanted to start by actually saying thank you to Franchone and Natalie. I was a classroom teacher and I taught kindergarten, and I cannot imagine if I reflect back onto what it would have felt like to transition in this kind of environment. I can't imagine what tremendous amounts of fortitude you all have to continue on and really serve these students in the ways that you have. So I want to say thank you, as we are Teacher Appreciation Week. And I want to add that as a mom and as an educator, I know that this moment is really, really very stressful for so many of us. And I hope, just as Natalie indicated, that we all learn to embrace each other in this particular moment and really think about, what does it take, as that challenge that Pat has put forward, what does it take for us to completely and radically transform how we envision what it means to have digital access? What would it mean to honor our community's needs when we see the most marginalized, when we see those who are not having equitable access and can't afford equitable access? What would it mean for us as a community to take a very different approach and simply reach out and literally create that network? We have a phenomenal opportunity here. We can actually start right now, since we know it's an injustice, we know it's a gap, and we know it's a divide. We can start right now and address that, remove the barriers, and support our children.
Thank you, Janeen. And we are going to end where we began with our educators tonight. And Natalie, I'll begin with you with your final remarks.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Janeen was saying. I think, starting now, let's go ahead and try to work things out and just get everybody acclimated and with all of the technology and tools that they need right now, so that when we roll into next school year, we can pick up on where we are as far as technology is concerned and have it integrated into our classrooms, and not going back to, okay, we're done with Google Classroom now, we're done with Canvas. Let's go ahead and keep this up, because we know we're in a technology age and these kids are going to need to know these skills no matter what job they decide to do. So I would like to see this continue into the next school year.
Sounds great. And I think it's important to point out that because of the unpredictability of the virus, you're exactly right. We could find ourselves going back to school. And then if you listen to some news reports and they talk about a second wave, we could end up back at home. So learning, or the school season, may be more of a hybrid next year. We just simply don't know. So that becomes more important. And that allows me to also address a question that came in. There was a question about whether or not we could assign Chromebooks in the same way that students are assigned textbooks. And fortunately, that does happen in CMS. Each student has a laptop they use in school, and because of that, they had a device that they could take home. So that's happening. Franchone Bay, we conclude with you. If you can share your final remarks.
Well, like Natalie and Janeen said, I think we just need to start looking toward the future. The models of so many industries have changed in terms of they're moving fast, and the classroom is still the classroom. There's desks, there's chairs, there's rows, and maybe this is a time when we just re-examine that and say, well, maybe it's time to change this model. Maybe we are moving to a more technical dependent type of model for learning. And it's sad to say you don't want that to go away, but maybe part of our evolution in education has to do with this technology. And right now we're seeing how this can possibly play out, because when we go back to school, if we get the opportunity to go back to school, we're going to have to set up some type of online platform for our students. It's just going to have to be a norm that they're going to be able to access this. So all of these things have to come together. The industry, the government, everybody has to come together in order to make this work. But just industries are changing, and maybe the whole school model has changed. That's my final words on that.
COVID-19 has taught us nothing else. It is that we must be flexible. So I think that's a great ending note. Thank you so much. So thank you to Franchone Bay, Natalie Jones, Janeen Bryant, and Pat Millen. I really appreciate it. And I would say thank you to all of you who joined us tonight. And if there's one message I hope that we will all take forward to any child that we have connection with, is that summer is not here yet. The school buildings may be closed, but school is in session. And as I always used to say to my own children, it's not about the grade. You are learning because it's important to do just for the sake of knowledge. So I hope we carry that message out there. And also, if you know of any family who is struggling or needs a device and didn't get one, or now needs access and didn't before, have them reach out to their schools because the mobile hotspots are available. I want to say thank you to the Gantt Center. It's been an honor, certainly, to moderate this panel. I have enjoyed the Unmasked series and do appreciate all the work that's being done there. And so, Athene Grace, I'm going to turn the program back over to you.
Thank you, Sonja. Thank you for your thoughtful and impactful words. You, our viewers, our supporters, your continued support allows us to keep programs like Unmasked alive, as with our text to give option. By texting Unmasked to 704-270-2299, you conveniently support the Gantt Center's mission and our ability to keep providing important conversations and resources. On behalf of the Gantt Center, I thank you all for joining us, for your input and your thought-provoking questions. Please be sure to join us next week, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our newest Unmasked program, as we have an introspective conversation with creatives. As always, please be safe and take care. Good night.